She's not here yet? Typical. My aunt's voice sliced through the crowd as I stood just a few feet away, invisible again. The sun was warm on my skin, but my chest felt hollow. Around me, families clustered under blue and maize banners, some holding balloons, others laughing through tears, arms full of flowers. I shifted my weight from one heel to the other, scanning the sea of familiar faces. None of them were mine. I checked my phone again. Nothing. No texts. No missed calls. The ceremony was starting soon, and I stood there like some forgotten name on a roster. Most girls around me were draped in sashes and surrounded by parents carrying signs that said, "So proud of you." I had silence. Just silence. I should have known. I did know. Ever since we were kids, Amanda was the star, the one who always seemed to do things right. When I won the science fair in 7th grade, Mom had said, "Amanda got straight A's. Again. Isn't that wonderful?" When I got accepted into Michigan, it was just a nod. Well, Amanda had better offers. And today, graduation day. My graduation day. Amanda hadn't even bothered to show up. The crowd rustled as my parents finally approached. Rick in his golf cap, Susan with sunglasses too large for her face. No flowers, no gift bag. Just two underwhelmed people walking toward me as if they'd been forced at gunpoint. "You found the seat numbers?" I asked, trying to smile. "We're standing in the back," Dad said. "Your name wasn't in the family seating chart." That wasn't true. I had sent the list in twice, but I didn't bother arguing. Mom adjusted her shawl and looked around. Nice weather. Amanda would have looked so good in this lighting. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. "She's not coming." "Of course not," Mom said, waving her hand. "She's busy." Busy. Doing what? Modeling for some startup's PR campaign? Flirting with that investor 20 years older than her? I wasn't even sure Amanda knew what I was graduating in. As the graduates lined up, a dean tapped my shoulder. "Natalie Reed?" I turned. "Yes?" "Congratulations. You've been selected to give the closing student address. One of the best GPAs in your community work really stood out." "Oh, thank you." Wow. I wasn't sure what to say. My hands trembled slightly as I took the speech assignment folder. Years of burning the candle at both ends, and finally someone noticed. Someone outside my family, at least. But before I could revel in it, Mom leaned in, her perfume sweet and cloying. "Just don't embarrass yourself up there. You tend to ramble." I blinked. I was chosen out of thousands of students. "That doesn't mean you have to be dramatic," she said, tucking a stray hair behind her ear. "Keep it simple. No soapboxes." I nodded, the familiar sting settling just behind my eyes. Every time I reached for approval, it slipped further out of reach, like trying to hold water in cupped hands. We moved toward the rows of chairs set for the ceremony. Guests filtered in, all looking for their graduates. My stomach churned as I scanned the area. Aunt Valerie already sitting front row, waving at someone behind me. When she caught sight of me walking past, her voice carried, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Why couldn't Amanda have gotten this honor?" She didn't say it with venom, just casual disappointment. As if it were natural to wish someone else were in my place. I kept walking, eyes fixed forward, breath shallow. The world tilted just slightly, and I suddenly felt like I was walking through water. I reached the stage stairs and climbed them slowly, heart hammering, hands clammy. The crowd was a blur now. The stage lights glared into my eyes as I took my place behind the podium. I opened the folder in my hands. Inside, a single line stared back at me, typed in bold, "Say what they don't want to hear." It wasn't part of the university's template. It wasn't even in my handwriting. Someone had slipped this into my folder. Maybe it was a glitch, or maybe it was a sign. I looked out over the audience at my parents, barely watching, Aunt Valerie leaning in to whisper something no doubt dismissive, and a few rows of strangers full of pride for other people's children. My hands trembled again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was adrenaline. Rage, maybe. Or something more dangerous? Clarity. They paid $160,000 for Amanda's Ivy League dream. For mine? Not even a bus pass. The line echoed in my head as I sat cross-legged on my narrow dorm bed, staring at the blinking cursor on my laptop screen. It was nearly 2 a.m. The glow of the desk lamp cast long, tired shadows across the cluttered room. Textbooks stacked like bricks, sticky notes peeling off the wall, and half-empty mugs that smelled of cold coffee and stress. I had rewritten the speech 4 times already. Every version started strong, then crumbled under the weight of what I really wanted to say. The truth. The unspeakable part of being the lesser child. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but all I could think of was that night in sophomore year when I got my FAFSA rejection. I had sprinted across campus in the rain to get to the financial aid office, only to be told there were no more emergency funds. I remember standing there, soaked, clutching a folder of pay stubs and letters while a clerk explained that parental support was expected at your income bracket. Parental support. What a joke. I leaned back against the wall, letting the room swallow me for a moment. The radiator clicked softly. My legs were sore from my last double shift at the diner downtown. I had picked it up last minute when a coworker called in sick, knowing I needed the tip money just to afford a cab to the graduation venue tomorrow. Amanda never had to think about money. From the moment she declared she wanted to study art history in New Haven, the checks flowed. First from Dad, then from our uncle. Then from that mysterious family investment account I was apparently never told about. She had new laptops every fall, apartment upgrades, even weekend getaways when school got too intense. Meanwhile, I waited tables, folded campus brochures at the admin office, and tutored high schoolers in algebra just to scrape by. I slept in the library more times than I could count. Skipped meals, said no to social events because I couldn't afford the Ubers, all for a degree they said I'd regret choosing. A memory flashed. Junior year. I was home for winter break, exhausted from finals, and dared to bring up my tuition shortfall at dinner. Mom barely looked up from her salad. "It's not our job to fund your choices," she said. "You could have gone local. You wanted the experience, so now you deal with it." I swallowed hard, turned back to my laptop. I had never said this to anyone, but that night broke something in me. Not because of the money, but because she didn't even pretend to care. My eyes scanned the desk. I reached for a small card buried under a pile of old notes. Pale blue, folded neatly, still blank inside. A thank you card I had bought months ago for Professor Hale and never sent. She had written my recommendation letters, pushed me through my lowest moments, even brought soup that time I caught the flu during midterms. I opened my email and typed, "Dear Professor Hale, I just wanted to say thank you. For everything. I know you've helped hundreds of students, but you were the first person here who made me feel like I wasn't invisible. Tomorrow I give the student speech." I almost backed out, but then I remembered your words. "If you have something to say it." "I'll try." Warmly, Natalie, I hit send before I could overthink it. A reply came 10 minutes later, lightning fast for a tenured professor. "Natalie, you believed in yourself first. I only helped. And I'll be in the audience tomorrow, cheering quietly but fiercely. Olivia." I sat frozen, rereading the message. My chest tightened, but in a different way than it had with Mom. This wasn't rejection. This was recognition. Quiet, steady, and real. I turned back to my speech. The opening line still glared up at me from the screen. Success isn't always funded. It's fought for. It wasn't some poetic metaphor. It was my truth. My scars stitched into syllables. I let the words breathe on the screen a moment longer, then began typing in earnest. No filters, no need for approval. Just the truth, one keystroke at a time. There's a family dinner later, just close relatives. Her mother's smile was more of a warning than an invitation. I blinked, thinking maybe I'd misheard. But the way she adjusted her purse strap, already pivoting her body away from me, told me I hadn't. Her message was clear. I wasn't included. Again. The sun was beginning to lower over the campus quad, casting warm golden streaks across the lawn where graduates huddled with their families, laughing and posing for pictures. I had stayed after the ceremony, lingering on the edges, watching the steady flow of hugs and flower bouquets, trying to pretend that the hollowness in my chest was just hunger or exhaustion. I had scrolled through a dozen selfies I'd taken with my classmates, most of them gone now. It wasn't the same. Not really. My parents finally showed up 30 minutes after the closing speech, weaving through the crowd like reluctant tourists. Mom in her crisp beige blazer, Dad in a button-down that still had the tag thread clinging to the seam. They smiled like it hurt. No flowers, no hugs, just a limp handshake and a white envelope pressed into my palm. "From the family," Mom said. "Congratulations." Inside was a $50 bill, crisp, unfolded, as if plucked from an ATM on the way here. I almost laughed. $50. After 4 years of scraping through on scholarships, tip jars, and ramen packets. After graduating magna cum laude. After giving the damn speech. I tucked the envelope into my purse without a word and glanced toward the crowd. Jordan, a classmate from my honors seminar, caught my eye and waved. She had been the one to lend me her blazer the day I had to meet a donor. Her parents were still snapping pictures, a whole mini photo shoot under a flowering magnolia tree. "You want a photo?" she asked, jogging over. "I'm good," I said quickly, just soaking it all in. She studied my face for a moment, then didn't press. My phone buzzed in my bag. I pulled it out. A voice note from Amanda. Just her cheerful voice chirping through the speaker. So proud of myself for pushing through Yale. Ugh, can't wait for the dinner tonight. I need wine. I stared at the screen. No mention of my graduation. Just her, as always. Center stage. Then I heard Mom's voice again, low but not low enough. For Amanda and Brian's promotion, just the family. Upstairs at LeBray's. LeBray's, the fancy restaurant downtown. Linen napkins, triple digits on the wine list. I turned, heart thudding. "What dinner?" Mom blinked at me like I was a ghost. "Oh, honey, it's just a small thing. Amanda wanted something private. Close relatives." "I'm your daughter," I said, the words dry and sharp. "We didn't think you'd want to come," Dad added, eyes darting away. "You've been busy." "Busy. Sure. Busy surviving. Busy fighting for a degree no one thought I deserved." I nodded slowly. "Of course. Makes sense." They left shortly after, merging back into the sea of silk robes and proud families, already halfway mentally checked out. I stood alone in the clearing crowd, fingers clenched around my phone. By sundown, I was standing across the street from LeBray's. The restaurant windows were tall and arched, glowing from within with soft yellow light. Through the glass, I saw them. Mom, Dad, Amanda, even Uncle Greg, laughing around a long table. Amanda's fiancé raised a glass. A toast. Probably for his promotion. Probably for her. They looked happy, like nothing was missing. I stood there for several minutes, watching. Not sad anymore. Just cold. Detached. They didn't know I was outside. They wouldn't care even if they did. I turned to go, gravel crunching softly beneath my flats. If I wasn't part of their celebration, maybe they won't be part of mine. I'd like to thank the people who never showed up for showing me how to stand alone. The mic hummed under my fingers as my voice echoed across the open-air amphitheater. A breeze rustled the folds of my gown, and somewhere in the second row, a baby cried. I stared into the sea of faces, some eager, some distracted, some already scrolling through their phones. But not mine. I wasn't looking for anyone anymore. I spotted Dean Williams at the corner of the platform, giving me a quiet thumbs up. It was the only encouraging gesture I'd seen all day that felt real. I took a slow breath. I know it's tradition to begin with thanks, so I'll start there. Thank you to the professors who taught us more than curriculum, who taught us how to think. Thank you to the friends who kept us sane through sleepless nights and final exams. And thank you to every janitor, barista, and lab assistant who kept this place running when no one was watching. A few claps. But mostly, I want to thank the people who weren't here. The ones who didn't answer the late night calls. The ones who missed birthdays, forgot applications were due, said, just get loans, or college is your choice. The ones who reminded me constantly that I was on my own. Someone in the back row gave a low whistle. I kept going. I used to think that success looked like approval, like someone finally turning around and saying, good job. And when that didn't come, I questioned myself, again and again. I waited for permission to be proud, for validation, for warmth. My hands shook just slightly. I tucked them behind the podium. But here's what I learned. There is a different kind of pride. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need applause. It lives in the choices you make at midnight when no one is watching. It lives in cold dorm rooms and handwritten scholarship essays and walking to class through snow with borrowed shoes. There was a shift in the air, a silence that wasn't empty. It was listening. Love, I've realized, isn't always in the places it should be. Sometimes it doesn't come from your home. Sometimes it comes from a stranger who offers you their last pen in a final, or a professor who reminds you you're enough, even when your family won't. I didn't name names, but I didn't need to. My gaze drifted slowly to the middle rows where my parents sat. Rick with his jaw tight, Susan looking everywhere but at me. Their smiles were frozen, polished, performed. I was told I couldn't do this alone, that I was making a mistake, that I'd fall apart without help. And maybe they were right. Maybe I couldn't. I let the pause land, a few murmurs in the crowd. But I did. And that was it. That line didn't need echo. It didn't need a follow-up. I felt the sound rise before I heard it. Applause. Hesitant at first, then strong. Like a wave gathering itself. Cheers erupted from all corners, professors standing, some classmates yelling my name. I didn't look for my parents again. I stepped back from the mic, one hand steadying the edge of the podium, the other at my side. The sun had shifted now, casting long golden light across the lawn. I should have felt hollow. But I didn't. Because for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't empty. The applause swelled behind me as I walked down the steps, and my parents sat frozen. They waited for her to come home for cake. She never did. The house on Sycamore Lane was dimly lit except for the flicker of balloons swaying under the ceiling fan. A banner reading, "Congratulations, Amanda," hung slightly crooked above the fireplace. On the kitchen table sat a bakery cake. 2 tiers, pink frosting, gold lettering, and not a single slice missing. Susan adjusted the knives and dessert plates for the 3rd time, muttering to herself. Maybe traffic's bad, she offered, not for the first time. Rick checked his phone again. She hasn't read my message. She saw Amanda's story. I know she did, Susan said, crossing her arms tightly. She's being dramatic. Amanda, perched on the couch with her feet up, didn't bother looking up from her phone. It's not a big deal, she said with a shrug. I don't even know why we're having this cake thing. I graduated last year. You got promoted, Susan reminded her. It matters. Amanda tossed her phone onto the cushion beside her. If she's mad about the dinner, she should just say it, not ghost us like this. Rick cleared his throat. She'll come around. She always does. But this time, Natalie didn't. In a tiny apartment across town, Natalie sat cross-legged on her secondhand couch, a single plate balanced on her knees. Dinner was humble. Leftover pasta, a slice of bread, a few strawberries. But it felt different tonight. She lit a candle anyway, more out of ceremony than necessity. The flame flickered warmly, filling the space with a soft glow that had nothing to prove to anyone. No cake, no applause. No manufactured celebration with cardboard smiles and offhand compliments. just silence. And for the first time in a long time, that silence didn't feel like punishment. She scrolled briefly through her phone, thumb hovering over the family group chat. The last message was from her mother. Home by 8, right? Cake's waiting. A heart emoji. A string of confetti. Natalie exhaled softly. Her finger held down the thread, and with one final tap, delete conversation. It was gone. The thread, the weight, the obligation. The weight lifted so easily it startled her. She set the phone aside and leaned back. Through the open window came the distant hum of cars and the sharp call of a siren slicing through city night. Somewhere, someone was celebrating something. But here, Natalie simply existed. And it was enough. She looked down at the empty plate, smiled to herself, and stood to rinse it. A soft chime from her phone drew her back. New email. Subject line: Polaris Tech interview confirmation. Her eyes flicked down to the message. Dear Ms. Flores, your interview with Polaris Tech is confirmed for Monday at 10 a.m. She read it twice. Then once more for the sheer pleasure of seeing her name in something that felt like a beginning. Natalie stood at the window for a moment, watching the breeze nudge the curtain just slightly. No need to go back. No need to explain. Her life was already unfolding, quietly, deliberately, in a direction entirely her own. ChatGPT Jan Noi. Taisao Amanda kan chuki kwa toi jetai jingya kan ho kwa koai. The question slipped from Natalie's mouth before she even realized she'd said it out loud. She stared at the caller ID on her phone. Citizens Credit Bank. The bank officer's voice on the other end was calm, professional, but there was a faint tension behind it, the kind that came when someone expected confusion or confrontation. I understand this may come as a surprise, Ms. Flores, the woman said, but you are listed as a partial co-owner on the property. Legally, we can't proceed with the refinancing without your consent. Natalie blinked. She was sitting in the corner of the break room at Polaris Tech, coffee cooling in her hand, an uneaten sandwich in front of her. The hum of printers and low chatter from down the hall seemed to dim as the words sank in. Co-owner? She repeated. Of Amanda's condo? Yes, ma'am. According to the deed, your name appears with a 25% ownership share. The original title was signed when you were 17, co-signed by your parents. Her mind raced. 17. That would have been the year she started community college, working night shifts just to afford a single textbook. And somehow, without her knowledge, she had become part owner of the apartment Amanda had used as her launchpad to Yale. I never signed anything, she said, her voice quieter now. You were a minor at the time, the bank officer explained gently. Your parents signed on your behalf. It's not uncommon, though certainly not transparent. Natalie's chest tightened. She thanked the woman, promised to follow up, and ended the call with fingers trembling just slightly. By late afternoon, she was seated in a small consultation room at the bank's downtown branch, across from a real estate attorney who looked equally perplexed. This deed, it's real, the attorney confirmed, flipping through the scanned documents. Filed legally, backdated properly. Your parents must have used your name to balance out the income-to-debt ratio. It helped Amanda qualify for more aid or better loan terms. Natalie's jaw tightened. So, technically, I helped fund her Ivy League degree? In a manner of speaking, yes. The absurdity of it sank in slowly. She hadn't gotten a penny. No help. No co-signers for her tuition. No savings account to dip into. Just second shifts and midnight study sessions. Meanwhile, her name had been borrowed, stolen, really, to cushion her sister's future. She leaned back in the chair, swallowing her disbelief. I want copies of everything, she said finally, and I won't be signing anything until I've had time to review it fully. The lawyer nodded. That's your right. That evening, she sat on her bed, documents spread out before her. The legal language was thick, but the facts were simple. Her parents had used her. Again. And they'd hoped, like always, that she wouldn't question it. Her inbox chimed. One new message, from Rick Flores' subject, about the condo. Natalie hesitated before clicking. The email was short. You don't want to go down this path, Natalie. Let it go. It's not worth it. She stared at the words, heart oddly calm. It wasn't a warning. It was a plea dressed in threat. An echo of all the other times they'd asked her to stay small, quiet, compliant. But this time she had paper. She had proof. And for the first time, they had something to lose. My name may have been just a signature to them, but now it's a shield. Natalie whispered the line under her breath as she stared at the old deed in front of her. Black ink on aged paper. Nothing dramatic at first glance. But now, every line pulsed with the weight of a betrayal buried under years of indifference and favoritism. The tiny office smelled of lavender and old books. Attorney Melissa Grange sat across from her, glasses perched low on her nose as she highlighted a section on the printout. You see this? Melissa said, tapping a paragraph. When your parents signed you on as a co-owner, they did so with the claim that you understood the implications. That's not just unethical. It borders on fraudulent. Natalie felt a dull throb in her temples. I was 17. I barely understood my FAFSA form. Exactly. They used you, Natalie. It happens more often than people think, especially within families. But here's the thing. You have legal standing now. Your signature isn't just history. It's leverage. Melissa's words sat heavily in the room, like a door creaking open to a space Natalie never imagined she could walk into. Control, authority. She had never felt those things in her family. Not even once. But now, with a few lines of dry legalese, she held something undeniable. They can't refinance, sell, or borrow against this property without your explicit approval, Melissa added. And if you wanted to, you could launch a formal inquiry into the original transfer. Natalie blinked slowly. What would that mean for them? Melissa hesitated. At minimum, legal headaches. At worst, financial audits, potential penalties. They'd have to disclose everything. Natalie didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. Her phone buzzed on the desk beside her. Amanda. Hey, I just heard you're digging into the condo stuff. I hope you're not making this bigger than it needs to be. Let's not overreact, okay? Love you, heart symbol. Natalie stared at the text for a full minute. The heart emoji burned her eyes more than any insult could. It was the same syrupy sweetness Amanda always used to sweep things under the rug. Minimize. Deflect. Manipulate. She put the phone down without answering. Instead, she opened her email. One unread message sat at the top. Professor Hale. Subject. Thought of you today. Dear Natalie, you once told me your voice felt small around people who should have protected you. But I see you now, learning the shape of your strength. Don't let fear shrink your story. OH. Natalie exhaled, steady. They wanted her quiet, reasonable, passive. But something had shifted. She wasn't just reacting anymore. She was choosing. Melissa pushed the folder toward her. Take these home. I'll draft a letter to notify the bank of your review period. You're under no obligation to sign anything. And if you want, we can move toward an inquiry. Natalie nodded. Yes, please draft the letter. Her voice was calm, measured, no trace of the girl who once apologized for simply being in the room. As she stepped out into the parking lot, her phone buzzed again. Amanda. Let's talk, please. Don't do anything rash. We're sisters, Nat. Natalie's thumb hovered over the reply bubble. Then she typed, slowly and carefully, You're right. This is bigger than you think. And she hit send without looking back. They spent years building walls. I just found a door they forgot to lock. Natalie closed the file folder and looked up at the county records office clerk, who handed her the receipt. The legal formality was simple, a public record noting a lien on the condo. But the consequences would ripple far beyond the dull beige walls of the office. She walked out, sunlight bouncing off the pavement, but her stomach didn't loosen. Not yet. This was just the beginning. Back at her apartment, Natalie placed the signed documents on the table and called Melissa. It's done. The lien is filed. No refinancing, no sale, nothing without my approval. Melissa's voice came through calm but pleased. Smart move. They'll feel the squeeze soon. Natalie exhaled. I didn't do it to punish them. I did it to stop bleeding. An hour later, a knock rattled her apartment door. She opened it just wide enough to see both her parents on the other side. Rick's jaw clenched, Susan's smile tight and sharp like cracked porcelain. Well, Susan began, arms folded. You've made your point. I wasn't trying to make a point, Natalie replied. I was protecting something that has my name on it. Rick's voice rose. You humiliated us at the bank. Amanda had everything set up and now it's frozen because of you? What kind of daughter? Natalie held up her phone, recording light blinking red. If you raise your voice again, I'll end this conversation and send the recording to Melissa. He took a step back, fists trembling. This is what you're doing to your own family? Natalie's voice didn't waver. Number, this is what you did. I'm just signing my name again. Susan's eyes flared. You don't understand how things work. That condo was just a lie? Natalie cut in. Yeah, I'm starting to understand exactly how things work. They didn't stay long after that. Susan muttered something about cleaning up this mess quietly, while Rick stared at her like she was someone he didn't raise. Maybe he never really had. When the door finally clicked shut, Natalie collapsed onto the couch, breath shallow. She wasn't used to this kind of confrontation. Not with them. For years, she had let silence be her survival strategy. But now, silence had turned into steel. Her phone buzzed. Melissa. You'll want to see this document. They've been lying about more than just the condo. Natalie read the message twice, pulse quickening. She picked up the envelope Melissa had couriered. Sealed. Marked confidential. Inside could be another fracture in the story she thought she knew. She stared at it for a long moment, then reached for the letter opener. Why would Amanda list my email on her loan documents? Natalie's voice was thin, almost swallowed by the silence in Melissa's office. She leaned forward, fingers hovering over the grainy photocopies spread across the desk. Her name was printed in block letters, Natalie Flores, right beside a Yahoo email she hadn't used since high school. Melissa tapped the corner of the page with her pen. It's not just that. Look here. This FAFSA renewal from 2018 lists your social security number and that same email. But this isn't your handwriting, right? Natalie scanned the scrawled letters. The loops on the G and the open E. They weren't hers. Not even close. She shook her head. Number, that's not mine. I never touched Amanda's financial forms. Why would I? Melissa didn't answer right away. She stacked the documents slowly, as if trying to piece together a timeline from shredded trust. Someone used your identity, your digital footprint, and your legal identifiers to boost Amanda's eligibility for aid. If that was intentional, we're talking federal fraud. Natalie swallowed hard. But I didn't even know until now. Does that make me complicit? Absolutely not, Melissa said, calm but firm. But it does mean you're a victim, and that gives you legal standing. If this went to court, you'd be protected as someone whose identity was misused without consent. Natalie blinked at the stack of documents, her own name turning stranger by the second. A decade of being overlooked, and now suddenly she was the linchpin in someone else's fraudulent dream? She leaned back in the chair, memories trickling in like poison. Senior year of high school, Amanda hogging the family computer. Mom saying Natalie could apply wherever she liked, as long as it didn't cost the family anything. The fight over college visits, the envelopes marked rejected and waitlisted, and the one from Michigan, the only school she got into, on a threadbare scholarship and a mountain of loans. I want to see for myself, she said, standing. I want to go back to the university. 2 hours later, Natalie stood inside the Office of Financial Aid at the University of Michigan. A young assistant named Kara took her ID and typed into her computer. We have an old linked email for your records. Natalie.Flores at grad18@yahoo.com. That one? Natalie nodded cautiously. Yes, but I never used that for anything other than my Netflix back then. Kara scrolled. We also have one that was used to co-sign documentation on a dependent FAFSA packet, associated with Amanda Flores. Natalie's stomach dropped. Is that even legal? Kara shrugged nervously. It happens. Siblings sometimes help, but only with written consent. Do you have a copy of any such authorization? No, Natalie said, voice flat, because I never gave one. Back at Melissa's office, she placed a printed copy of the linked email page on the desk. I didn't sign. I didn't know. I didn't authorize anything, she said. Melissa nodded slowly. We have enough. This isn't just shady family finance anymore. This is federal fraud. And they used you as the mule. Natalie felt something shift. Not just rage or betrayal, but something sharper. Proof. She opened a private browser tab on her phone and typed quickly. Student Aid Integrity Division. Anonymous reporting portal. She didn't write a full story, just uploaded 2 scanned PDFs and typed, identity used without consent in multiple FAFSA filings. I request an investigation. She hit send. For the first time in years, her heart pounded not from helplessness, but from action. What kind of parents lie to protect one child by stealing from the other? The rain had thinned into mist as Natalie walked the edge of the city, hands deep in her coat pockets, thoughts louder than the traffic. She paused under a street lamp flickering weakly, a ghost of the night she was living through. The city felt familiar but distant, like walking into a memory that no longer fit. A voicemail waited on her phone. She knew the voice before she even pressed play. Amanda, I can't believe you're doing this to me. Do you even realize what you've caused? My credit's a disaster. They froze everything. You always have to be the martyr. So dramatic. This is why no one ever... Never mind. You've made your choice. Just stay out of my life. Natalie didn't flinch. She saved the message, not out of spite, but as a record. One more thread in a web she no longer wanted to be caught in. She turned the corner onto 14th and paused at the cafe with the chipped blue awning. She'd worked here during undergrad, mopping floors, serving overpriced lattes, pretending she didn't notice classmates walking by without a glance. She stepped inside. The barista didn't recognize her. She didn't expect them to. As she sipped a lukewarm tea at the corner table, her old corner table, she pulled out her phone again and opened a file of old voice notes she used to record for herself. Notes she'd made after late-night shifts, just to keep from crying alone in silence. She pressed play on one labeled January 2019. Natalie's past voice. I'm so tired. I worked 12 hours today and still can't pay next month's tuition. Amanda just got a new laptop. Dad said she needs it more. I feel invisible. I hate that I'm starting to believe them. She stopped the audio, unable to listen further. Outside, the rain had returned, softer now. She made her way home, changed into warm clothes, and sat at her kitchen table. A single sheet of paper lay in front of her. Natalie began to write. Not a letter, not a speech, just the facts. Every detail she remembered. FAFSA forms, the condo, Amanda's emails, her own tears. The timeline ran 4 pages long. She stared at it, not with anger, but with clarity. Then she lit a match. The flame curled through the paper slowly, hungrily. Years of manipulation burned to ash in her quiet apartment. Her phone buzzed again. A voice memo this time. Professor Hale. Hale's voice. You're not hurting them, Natalie. You're choosing you. There's a difference. Don't forget it. She smiled faintly. She sat down at her desk and opened a blank email. Her fingers hesitated for only a second before she typed. Subject. Watch me. You once told me I'd never make it without you. Watch me. Natalie. She hit send. There was no fury in her heart. Only space, like a deep inhale after years of shallow breaths. As she closed her laptop, another email arrived. Subject: Keynote invitation, alumni speaker series. Dear Ms. Flores, in recognition of your resilience, leadership, and impact, we'd be honored to invite you as the keynote speaker at this year's Voices of Change alumni event. You represent the very essence of what we hope our students become. Natalie didn't cry. Not this time. She just leaned back, looked out her window at the glittering city, and whispered, "Maybe I do. You'll never be more than a footnote in Amanda's life," my mother once said. Today, I'm the headline. Natalie stood behind the curtain, fingers curled around the edges of her printed speech. The soft hum of hundreds of attendees buzzed beyond the thick velvet drapes. Laughter, murmurs, the clink of glassware. It all formed a low tide of energy that washed up against her shoes. Dean Williams stood beside her, warm as always, adjusting his glasses. "Are you ready?" Natalie smiled, more for herself than for him. "I've been ready for years." The lights dimmed. Applause greeted the dean's introduction, polite but curious. He spoke with careful reverence, highlighting her achievements, her resilience, her growth. No names, no scandals, just her own quiet power, framed in legacy. "And now," the dean concluded, "please welcome a woman whose story reminds us that adversity is not an end, but a beginning. Natalie Flores." She stepped into the light. The hall quieted, save for the clicks of camera phones and an occasional cough. Natalie looked out into the sea of faces, students, faculty, alumni. But she imagined only one, the version of herself from 10 years ago, wearing a coffee-stained apron, watching commencement from the shadows. "I stand here," she began, "not as the best student or the loudest voice. I was never anyone's favorite, but I've learned that being unseen doesn't make you unworthy." Heads turned, listening closer now. "I once received a letter that read, 'Your financial aid has been denied due to incomplete verification.' I didn't understand it. I'd submitted everything. Or so I thought. It turns out when you don't have advocates, mistakes become your responsibility. Burdens become your inheritance." Natalie unfolded the faded letter, reading it out loud, her voice steady. The ink had dulled, but the words hadn't. As she paused, a rustle near the back of the room pulled her attention. A tall figure entered quietly. Amanda. Her heels clicked too loudly on the polished floor. Heads turned, then returned forward. Natalie met her eyes for a single breath. No nod, no smile, just silence. She returned to the podium. "Success, I've come to realize, is not handed down like heirlooms. It's stitched together from what others discard. Late-night shifts, rejection letters, being told repeatedly that you're not enough, that you're a shadow in someone else's spotlight." She let that hang. A flicker of discomfort rippled across the audience. "Success is what you build from the scraps others leave behind." There it was. The line she had carried for months, maybe years. Delivered not with bitterness, but with weight. Applause came slowly, then faster, rising like a wave. Students stood. Professors nodded. Amanda remained seated, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. Natalie stepped down, breath shaking but shoulders straight. She didn't need to look at her phone to feel its vibration, but she did. A message lit up the screen. Confidential tip received. Amanda Flores. Federal Student Aid Division review triggered. She stared at it for a moment, then slipped the phone into her blazer pocket. Let the truth echo. She had spoken. Finally and fully. "They thought I'd be too scared to speak. I wasn't. And now someone's listening." The lights in the government building buzzed faintly overhead, casting long shadows across the beige conference room. Natalie sat in a stiff-backed chair, hands folded carefully on the table. Across from her sat James Cole, a federal auditor with salt and pepper hair and a voice that carried the sharpness of someone used to cutting through excuses. Melissa sat beside Natalie, steady and poised. A neat folder sat open in front of them, lined with pages of emails, transcripts, scanned financial forms, all annotated and indexed. Evidence of years of silence unraveling. Ms. Flores, James said, please confirm. This is your name and signature listed on the FAFSA verification form for the 2017 to 2018 academic year? Natalie leaned forward. That's my name, but I didn't sign that document. James nodded once and made a mark on his form. And this email account, listed as your contact during Amanda Flores's financial aid renewal, did you create or use this address? No, Natalie replied. That's not mine, but it looks like mine, just off by one letter. Melissa interjected. The domain was registered 2 weeks before the form was submitted. We've traced it to an IP associated with Rick and Susan Flores. James raised an eyebrow. Noted. Each question drilled deeper, and Natalie answered with the clarity of someone who had once been gaslit into questioning her own memory. But no longer. Her voice was even. Her hands never trembled. For every year they made her feel small, she now returned with a fact. After nearly 2 hours, the meeting wrapped. James stood, gathering the files. We'll be expanding this inquiry, he said. Based on today's review, this may extend beyond simple misrepresentation. Thank you for coming forward, Ms. Flores. Natalie gave a small nod. I'm just telling the truth. Outside, the air felt cold despite the sun. She and Melissa walked toward the parking lot, silence thick between them. You held your ground, Melissa finally said. That matters. I thought I'd feel lighter, Natalie admitted. Melissa glanced at her. You will, once this is done. Later that evening, Natalie sat in her apartment, scrolling through her inbox when a subject line stopped her cold. Exposing the Ivy League lie. One graduate speaks out. Campus Echo blog. Her face flushed as she clicked. The article was short but pointed. An anonymous source close to the case detailing financial inconsistencies, alleged fraud, and the bravery of a former student who chose truth over family comfort. They didn't name her, but everyone who mattered would know. Her phone buzzed. A new message. Amanda. Amanda. You ruined my life. Natalie stared at it. No greeting, no apology. Just blame, as always. She didn't reply. Instead, she closed the app and poured herself a glass of water. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. The phone rang. Melissa's name lit up the screen. Natalie, Melissa said quickly. They found more. Forged tax documents in your parents' names. They're now officially under investigation. Natalie didn't speak at first. Her heart didn't race and her throat didn't close. The fear had finally left her. They did this to themselves, she said quietly. The echo of truth was no longer a whisper. It was a reckoning. They thought I'd be too scared to speak. I wasn't. And now someone's listening. Natalie adjusted the cuffs of her blazer, hands unusually steady despite the government seal etched into the glass doors before her. The Federal Aid Oversight Office was a building she'd never imagined herself entering, let alone as a key witness. Melissa Grange walked beside her, calm and composed. They passed through security and followed a staffer into a windowless room where a camera was already mounted and recording, a laptop open beside it. Waiting inside was James Cole, the assigned federal auditor. Graying temples, shirt sleeves crisp, posture alert. He greeted them with a nod, then gestured toward the seat across from him. Ms. Flores, thank you for coming in. We understand this isn't easy. Natalie sat, back straight. I'm here to tell the truth. James tapped a few keys. We've reviewed preliminary documents from your counsel. Today, we'd like to hear your statement in your own words. Just start from what you know. She opened the folder she'd brought. Copies of emails, scans of FAFSA documents, a timeline carefully printed and highlighted. But she didn't reach for the papers. She looked James in the eye. My name was used to apply for loans and financial aid I never consented to. I didn't know I was part of Amanda Flores's education financing until a bank officer called me about refinancing a condo I didn't even know I co-owned. She paused, not to gather courage, but to ensure he was listening. He was. Melissa slid a page across the table. Amanda's FAFSA application with Natalie's name and a forged email address. We've confirmed this domain was created using a masked IP linked to Rick Flores, Melissa said. Mr. Flores is Natalie's father. James made a note. And you had no knowledge of this email being created? Natalie shook her head. I found out about it last month. The university still had it listed as my contact. He nodded again, more gravely this time. They continued for over an hour. James asked for clarification on dates. Natalie referenced bank calls, school records, even the transcript of her graduation speech. The evidence wasn't just on paper. It lived in memory, in the ache of being erased for years. When they finally stepped outside into the bright early afternoon, Melissa exhaled quietly. You did well. Natalie adjusted her sunglasses. I feel like I'm finally speaking in a language they can't ignore. That evening, her phone lit up with a notification from an anonymous student blog, Campus Insider. She clicked. Former student blows whistle on siblings aid fraud. It wasn't detailed and her name wasn't mentioned, but the implication was crystal clear. A few screenshots, vague references to a once sidelined graduate, a photo of Amanda from a prior university banquet, and a final note. Sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest truths. Her phone buzzed again. A text. Amanda, you ruined my life. Natalie stared at the words, thumbs hovering. She didn't respond. What could she say? That she'd only revealed what had been hidden? That she'd simply stopped lying on their behalf? Instead, she put the phone down and poured herself tea, letting the silence fill the room. No need to explain herself. The facts were out now. Just before bed, another call came through. Melissa's voice was urgent, but steady. They found something else. Natalie sat up straighter. What? Forged tax returns. Your parents filed documents claiming you were financially dependent on them, while also omitting you from household expense declarations. It's inconsistent and illegal. Natalie didn't speak for a moment. Your parents are now officially part of the investigation. She closed her eyes and breathed out slowly. The fallout had finally reached them. For years, they'd lied to protect Amanda. Now, the law was no longer looking the other way. And Natalie? She wasn't scared anymore. Not even a little. I used to think silence was survival. Now I know it was submission. Natalie ran her fingers across the smooth surface of her new desk, still smelling faintly of varnish and fresh opportunity. The plaque beside her nameplate read, Product Strategy Associate, Polaris Tech. Sunlight filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the soft beige walls and casting gentle reflections on her laptop screen. Outside, traffic buzzed like a different world altogether. Distant. Irrelevant. Her inbox blinked. Meeting invites, a warm welcome from the HR team, and one email from a name she hadn't expected. Jordan Lynn. Saw your alumni speech. Respect. Coffee sometime? She smiled, tilting her chair back slightly. There was no pressure behind the message, just curiosity, memory. Her first week had been a whirlwind. Strategy briefs, orientation videos, new software to learn. But unlike every room she had walked into before, here, no one asked who she was in relation to someone else. There was no Amanda shadowing her every move. Just Natalie. Capable. Present. Melissa met her at a quiet cafe a few blocks from campus. The same one where, years ago, Natalie had once mopped the floors after closing. Polaris looks good on you, Melissa said, stirring her tea. Natalie sipped slowly, savoring the taste of something earned. Melissa set down her cup. There's talk at the Oversight Committee. Your case is being used as a reference model for internal reform. Natalie raised her eyebrows. They're considering new safeguards. Cross-verification protocols, better accountability for dependent status claims. You might have started something much bigger. A beat passed before Natalie replied. That was never the goal. I know, Melissa said, but impact rarely checks with intention. They talked a while longer about legal nuance, Amanda's quiet disappearance from public records, and the slow wheels of justice. When they parted, Melissa handed her a thick envelope. This arrived at my office. No return address, but I'd know that handwriting anywhere. Natalie opened it at home. Inside was a handwritten card from Professor Hale. Dear Natalie, some stories must be told aloud. Yours change lives. We don't always get to rewrite the past, but sometimes we get the last word. With pride, Olivia Hale. She pressed the card to her chest, a breath catching somewhere between sorrow and something sturdier. Not joy exactly, something more grounded. Peace. Later that night, Natalie sat by her bedroom window, laptop glowing softly. She glanced at the message thread with Jordan. No reply yet. But the idea of reconnecting didn't feel so risky anymore. She picked up her phone and texted. Friday works for me. Same cafe? Seconds later. Deal. Can't wait. The shift wasn't seismic, but it was certain. Natalie was no longer trying to prove anything to anyone. Not Amanda. Not her parents. Not even herself. She had stepped out from under the weight of being the forgotten one, and found that the world was still spinning, still open. As she moved to shut her laptop, another tab caught her eye. An unopened email from the university's TEDx chapter. Subject? Would you speak? She clicked. We'd be honored to have you share your story this fall. Your voice matters. Your journey is more than inspiring. It's necessary. Natalie didn't reply right away. She let the words sit. Not long ago, she would have hesitated, would have asked herself if she was enough. But now she knew. She didn't need a spotlight. She was the light. She closed the email, but only for now. The invitation lingered on screen. Would she speak? She looked out the window, then back at her reflection in the glass. Yes, she would. I used to carry their last name like a wound. Now it's just a line I crossed over. The lights above the TEDx stage warmed Natalie's shoulders, but her palms were cold. The red carpet circle beneath her feet had been polished to a near gleam, reflecting her heels and the slow, practiced rhythm of her breaths. The crowd ahead was dimmed, only the front row clearly visible. But the recording cameras blinked like quiet sentinels, ensuring every word would find its way to the world. Behind her, projected in clean, sans serif font, was the talk's title. Lessons They Didn't Mean to Teach Me. Natalie smiled softly before stepping up to the mic. She didn't need to clear her throat or adjust her blouse. For once, everything fit. I want to tell you about the things I learned. Not through support, but in spite of it. Not with a cheering section, but with silence so loud it filled every room I entered. A pause. I was told I was difficult, that I expected too much, that I should be more like her. A few heads in the audience tilted, curious. Her was never named and never would be. They funded her dreams. They told me mine were indulgent. They called hers a future. Mine, a phase. But the funny thing about being underestimated, especially by those who claim to love you, is that you either shrink or you sharpen. Natalie let that hang for a breath. I sharpened. The screen behind her flickered briefly. Images appeared. A blurry graduation photo, a scanned FAFSA rejection letter, a candid of her folding napkins behind a restaurant's kitchen door. I've stood on the outside of warm dining rooms, outside glass windows, watching celebrations I paid for but wasn't invited to. I've listened to applause meant for someone else. But even in the cold, I learned something. Being unwanted isn't the same as being unworthy. One woman in the third row pressed a tissue to her cheek. Natalie walked slowly across the stage, deliberate, controlled. I used to think family was something fixed, something we're born into, assigned, stamped. But I've come to learn that family isn't blood. It's not obligation. It's who shows up when no one else will. Sometimes that's a professor who emails encouragement, a friend who notices you standing alone, or the version of yourself who refuses to stay small. Backstage, a technician glanced at the monitor. The live counter showed over 9,000 concurrent viewers. One of them sat alone in a living room far from the stage, clutching a blanket over her chest like armor. Susan Flores watched the screen with a stillness bordering on reverence. The couch cushion beside her remained empty. No Amanda, no Rick, just her and the daughter she hadn't dared to listen to. Until now. Natalie's voice did not tremble as she approached the conclusion. Some people will say this is about revenge, that it's personal. They're wrong. This is about being seen, about refusing to be erased. She stepped back into the center of the red circle, spine straight, eyes clear. My name is Natalie Flores, and I was never the failure. They were just never brave enough to see me. There was a moment of silence before the applause came, a real rising roar that filled the theater like surf. People stood. Some whistled. Others just clapped, hands trembling with something between admiration and shared ache. Natalie didn't bow. She simply smiled. Not wide or showy, just enough. Then she walked off stage, heels clicking lightly against wood, the kind of sound that once followed her sister but now echoed behind her. Backstage, the organizers congratulated her, but she barely heard them. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, unread messages pouring in like spring rain. She let them sit. Instead, she returned home, lit a candle, let silence wrap around her. Not like a bruise, but like a warm coat. Weeks later, in a cozy bookstore tucked between a florist and a wine shop, Natalie sat at a long wooden table beneath a hand-lettered sign. Author signing today. Meet Natalie Flores. Copies of her memoir, The Unfunded Daughter, were stacked in careful piles around her. The cover showed a blurred silhouette walking away from a mansion, alone, steady, head high. A little girl approached the table shyly, holding a copy in both hands. My mom said I could get one. Can you write my name in it? Natalie nodded. What's your name? Leah. She opened the cover, pen poised. To Leah, your name is the start of something powerful. Never let anyone convince you it's not. She handed it back, meeting the girl's wide eyes with a wink. Outside, clouds moved slowly across the sky. In another timeline, Natalie might have been watching someone else speak, someone else sign, someone else be seen. But not in this one. In this timeline, she was the one they came for. In this timeline, she was no one's shadow, and she was never going back. Years of silence were once her shield, but now Natalie's voice had become the sharpest sword. What they tried to bury, she brought to light, turning their forged lies into stepping stones toward truth. Justice doesn't always roar in a courtroom. Sometimes it whispers through a speech, echoes in a headline, and writes itself in the name they once tried to erase. Because when injustice is met with unwavering courage, the final verdict can echo through a lifetime. Perhaps standing up today means you'll never again have to bow to injustice tomorrow. Like, share, and subscribe if this story moved you. Comment 1 if you felt seen, or 2 if you're still thinking it through.